always had a relationship with God, but it wasn't until probably about within the last 5 years or so that I really began to take hold of the idea of like what it's like to have a relationship. And
Mm,
what really got that started was this idea of like, everybody has the question of like, well, what's my purpose in life? Like, what am I called to
yeah,
do? Why am I here on earth? And I was just at a point where I was like, God, really, what am I doing? Like, I'm in church, I'm actually serving you. Like, I don't do a lot of things. And, I've never been the one to like smoke or drink or any of that
yeah.
kind of things. It just never really interested me. So I was kind of like, it's got to be good for something. Like I'm telling God, like it's good for something. Like I get bonus points or whatever for whatever. But I just was praying and I just felt like he was like, you're called to be an encourager. And that just so gripped my soul when I tell you, I was like, okay, and I'm a task oriented person.
Uh-huh.
And so it was almost like I just got a checklist, like a to do list of like encourage. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I can do that.
A new assignment. That's so
You're
good.
right. Exactly. And ever since then, I was just like, all right, I'm going to not only know Bible stories, because, I know the stories, but really dive deep into like what they mean. What is it? Why is Jonah relevant to me? Why do I
Mhm.
care about any of these things? Like I get them from a principle standpoint, but the Bible is not like a self-help book. Like there's a reason why we need to really learn these things, not just like motivational or inspirational stories. And just seeing as I've been learning and growing, even my husband and I talk about these types of things because he's really into the Bible and just is so great with like context and background and all that kind of stuff.
That's so good.
Yeah, he's definitely helped me. We just like talk about it and stuff like that from time to time. And just really understanding how like I have taken for granted. I've just taken God for granted for a long time. I
Mhm.
hear your story and I hear people like you that have come to know God when you didn't have a life. You had a life before Christ that you are, aware of and like stuff like that. I mean, I was 5, so what was
Yeah.
I doing?
Yeah.
But it's just like when I see people like you who have been so transformed, who you can't even tell. It's like, how like Daniel, I mean, the 3 Hebrew boys were in the fire, and it says that
Mm,
there was no smell of smoke. Like if you didn't know they were there, you wouldn't be able to tell. And I feel like,
wow.
I took advantage of that relationship, and I was like, I'm gonna take this more seriously,
Wow.
especially for my children. Them, I wanting them to learn and continue that legacy of faith and knowing God and knowing how much He loves us, like legitimately, and how much Bible, excuse me, I've heard that it's a love letter, but when you really read it and you see the grace and the mercy and the love of God woven into every section, it's like, wow, like you really do love me. Like, who am I that you give me this opportunity to have relationship with you? And so, it's really been a journey since then. And then, like I said before, as I've learned, when I feel like I should share, then I share. Like I don't share everything, but I just when those moments happen, and I'm like, oh my gosh, someone needs to know this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really, kind of how I got here.
No, that's so good. And there's definitely a few things I want to unpack from that. Just like the first one being like how our testimonies inspire each other. And like the more we like are around other believers
Yep.
and we hear what God's doing in other people's lives, like that's why fellowship is so important too. And like we're around people and we follow
Yeah.
people on social media and we just see what God is doing in the lives of people we know and love and in the lives of people all over the world because it continues to give us different perspectives of who he is,
Right.
which helps us understand and cherish that love more, like you said. And then something else I want to go into is, yeah, like the danger of being lukewarm,
Mm,
which I think more people can relate to. Like so many people, like I know so many people that consider themselves Christians or have, the cross tattooed on them somewhere, but they don't really like know who they have access to. They don't really know God. So just I guess when you like how I guess I'm trying to figure out how to ask that. Like what would you feel like is the main like danger of that place of being, or I guess like kind of what you were going into is knowing on the other side how good God's love is. So it's just kind of like missing out on the
Yeah,
fullness of God if you're taking it for granted. But I think that there's real danger in it too because
yeah,
you just don't know what you don't know.
exactly. And I think that a lot of times what I find is that people, it's almost like you hear like, oh, you're not going to hell anymore? Great.
Mm,
But it's like it's so much more than not going to hell. It's so much more than like what you are missing out on. It's all of the things that, like you said, what you're gaining, who you have access to, and not in like a genie type way. Because I think sometimes people fall into that too, where they rely on God like as if He's their next horoscope, or like
yeah,
like God, just tell me my future. And you're like, that's not how it works. There really
yeah.
is a genuine relationship there. The sad part is what I
Mm,
realize, even for me, is like how much I really was missing out on a level of relationship that I had. So it's like, yeah, I prayed, I did those things. I served in our church, worship and all those types of things, and had those moments. But
mhm,
it wasn't really like the day to day lifestyle,
mhm,
even though I was still reading my Bible and praying. And that's the crazy part about this life. It's like you could go through the motions and still miss out on the thing. You know what I mean? You could still,
yeah,
like, in any, like, you think of a romantic relationship, like you're with your husband, like you could go through, I love you, I'm gonna hold your hand, we're gonna eat dinner. But it's like until you really invest, until you really make the decision to get to know him in a
mm,
way that is deeper, it's like, yeah, you're still married and you might even have a level of happiness, but are you really like, is that the fullness of what your relationship could be?